Hello everybody, and welcome back to more Kerbal Space Program. The last time we were here, we near missed the moon, which means we went to the moon over there, and then we came back. We didn't land, we just went into its orbit, and then came back to Kerbin and landed, and got a ton of science for that, which is really good. And what that science allowed us to do was to unlock quite a few things, including fuel ducts, which are important for making the craft that we need in order to get to the moon and come back. So to actually land on the moon is way more difficult than what we did previously, which was get into the orbit. So our goals, these episodes, are to get to the moon and come back, have a successful moon landing. Now, we could go with the unmanned probe here, just in case it doesn't quite make it. But I'm going to be ballsy, and I'm going to say I'm pretty sure I can do it, especially with the stuff that we have. So we are going to set up a pretty complex engine system, starting with I guess a pod at the top. We want our lander and science pod all geared out, so let's make that real quick. So you want the Science Junior, and you want at least 2 of these. I think that's kind of the nice thing. Probably could do 2 Science Juniors. Doesn't really have a lot of mass, so not really gonna hurt us if we have 2 as opposed to just 1. But we also want a communications on here, and we'll just put that right there so we can put other things on the Science Juniors as we're building this. A parachute is definitely needed. We'll actually have several parachutes, and I did not mean to cover that door up. Dang it, I hate when that happens. No, I just want 1, game. I just want 1 antenna. I don't need 30. However, I do need like 30 batteries. We'll put a ton back here, like so, which actually will do the job of keeping us powered up. We don't really have solar panels yet, unfortunately. As you can see, not in science or in utility. Solar panels are really powerful, so we'll need to unlock those as soon as we possibly can, especially if we want to do further away missions than just the moon, which we do. But at the moment, we're just stacking a ton of batteries, which will get the job done. Okay, batteries placed. They're looking pretty good. I like how they actually kind of add a really strange depth to the lander itself. This part is going to land on the moon, but it's not the only piece that's going to land on the moon. We'll have engines attached to it as well, so we need to be kind of careful with what we're doing here. We do want to also place just 1 of these on... Actually, no, we don't need that because we're not docking with anything. I was going to... See, this is the mod thing that you would normally have. Let me pull this off and put this here. Totally forgot about that. But with this mech jeb thing, that's how you do the auto docking, but we're not going to be doing an Apollo-style mission. See, with Apollo, and many of you should know this, and if you don't, I am super old, and I don't know, maybe they just don't teach this thing in schools anymore, but with the Apollo thing, you really want to have a ship that is in orbit above the moon, right? So that's pretty standard. I don't think anybody's too surprised about that, right? So you want one that's in orbit above the moon, and then you want your lander to actually go and land, off. So you would orbit around the moon, you would disconnect your main lander like so, but it would have an engine on the bottom, and you would land yourself on the moon's surface, and then you would go back up into orbit, which is a lot easier than getting out of orbit of an actual planet that has an atmosphere, and then you would redock with your fueling station, your main station, and that will also get you back to the planet. That's how you do an Apollo-style mission. We don't really need to do that, so we're not going to be too concerned over it. However, we do need to be concerned about landing, so that's why I put some landing gear here. We're also going to put some parachutes, some additional parachutes, just to be safe, and we'll put 2 more on the side up here. I don't want to lose this thing. There we go. Looking nice. Okay, so let's start adding the engines, the bits that are going to get us to the moon. So we're going to start with a decoupler, and then we need a fairly large engine, which is quite important. So we're going to do this like so, right? So you have the decoupler and then the fuel, and then we'll do this engine. Yeah, we want a lot of thrust, which that is kind of our base, but then we start getting a bit nuts with how we're actually going to do this. But you know what? I think I'm going to go smaller engines because we're carrying a lot of weight already with this, and to get out of orbit, it may really hurt us. So we're going to go with this kind of setup, I think. No, we're going to go with this. This should be enough to get us to the moon and back. Not this one, but you'll see in a second when I get this all set up. But first, we need radial decouplers. So as you can tell, we need quite a few of them. Quite a few. And then we're going to take the same engine that's in the, or the same fuel tank that's in the middle there. I keep saying engine. I did that last episodes as well. And we're just going to throw this sucker. Try to get it nice and even. Oh gosh. Camera's making it very difficult. How about right there? Perfect. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to throw these engines on the bottom like so. Now, together, these engines don't, I mean, or singular, these engines don't really do a whole lot, but together they add quite a bit of thrust. So that's why we have that there. And we want to throw one of these aerodynamic cones on the top of all these. That will just help getting out of space. And out of space, I mean clearly out of the atmosphere. So now I'm going to show you how to set up what's called an asparagus system. And this is something that doesn't necessarily work IRL, you know, but it is a thing that works within the game quite well. So I'll show you how to do it. Basically, the way Kerbal works is if you have these fuel lines, it will attach fuel from one tank to another, which means it'll draw fuel. So if we do this one to this one, you see the arrows there saying that this fuel pump is going to draw the fuel out of this engine into this one. Now, the way that Kerbal works is it's going to do it out of the furthest engine, or the furthest fuel tank first, into all of the engines. So if we do this, and then we attach this one to the center fuel tank, like so. So what's going to happen is all of the engines that are connected in this setup here, so these 4 engines, are going to draw fuel out of this fuel tank first. So this one will empty first, then this one, then this one, then the middle. So what happens is you decouple the pieces off that you no longer need. So we're going to do the exact same setup on this side. So we go from this one to this one, and then this one to this one, and then this one to the center. Right, pretty basic. So when we look from above, we see that these 2 engines on the outside are together, and then it kind of moves clockwise on both of them. So these 2 engines will drop off, then these 2, then these 2, and then we're left with the center. So what effect this has is it's removing mass that you no longer need. So as you're dropping fuel, you're no longer needing that fuel, so you're going to try to get rid of it. So let's set up our staging a bit here. I'm going to put all of the parachutes into one because we want all of those parachutes working in tandem. And then what we are going to do is we are going to set these engines up. So we got to find the right engines. I think all of these engines should be together, right? So that one's in there. And okay, so all 7 of those engines are together. Now we need to set up the decouplers properly. So we want a new bank, and then we want to find which decouplers are which. So this one is this one here. And then we click back on this, we get rid of all these as a selection. And then that one is this one here. So now when I hover over these 2, you see that those 2 fuel tanks right there are going to go together with that decoupling. Then we want to do the same thing for the other few. So we have this one, which is the one we're looking for. We want to add a new bank. Oh, of course, we just screwed that up. There we go. We want to add a new bank. We want to put that one there. And we want to find this one. So we go back to this. We unclick all these. And we have this one here. So what will happen is these will decouple. Let me go from the top so you can actually kind of see it a little bit better. These will decouple, then those, then those. So you can see it from the side. The last ones to decouple are these edge. So this is a really efficient way of doing what's called an asparagus system, which is quite nice. Now we just need to attach a second bit to the bottom here, which is not too hard to do. We need to start with a decoupler right in the center, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to add an extra fuel tank, not a large one, just a smaller one. You don't have to do this. This is just the way I like to do it. which will kind of separate these two bits out, and then we're going to do a large fuel tank, and we're going to make the exact same setup that we have up here down here. So we're still going to use the radial decouplers like so, and probably mid, I would say. Let's see if that works with the engines or the fuel tanks. Keep doing that. And it does, which they look all fairly even. That'll work. Okay, I'm going to set this up, and it will be rocking out the asparagus system as well. All right, so engines are in place. We have the actual engine going here, the first one, the 215 thrust one. It tends to work pretty well for this. And now we're going to hook up our fuel lines properly. Now, the important thing with these is that you do them one at a time, and you be careful with it, like I did there. You know, it's just not connecting right, so we're going to do it this way. There we go. It's important you hook these one up at a time instead of using the multiplier down at the bottom, because it just won't set it up properly. So really the only way to do it without, you know, running into issues later on is to actually place them manually down. All right, so our asparagus system is set up at the bottom. Now we just need to set up the staging for it. Once again, we want all 7 engines to fire at the same time, and then we're going to break these decouplers up into the correct ones. And one thing I always do is I go back when I'm done with these decouplers and I check to make sure that they're in the right order, because you don't want to be getting rid of fuel that you still have. You know, you want to be using every ounce of fuel left, which is why this method is so efficient, because that's what it does. It makes sure you're using all of your fuel and getting rid of the mass that you no longer need. So that is correct. That is correct. And let's just double check. That is correct. Good. So what's going to happen, these bottom engines will fire off. Then you have the decouplers going at their right spots. And then we are going to set up this there like so. So this middle one will decouple when all of these have done doing their things. And then we'll start on these engines. The hope is that this will get us into orbit and then start towards the moon. And the rest of this will get us to the moon. So we don't know, because this is my first time setting up this kind of system, we don't know what effect this is going to have and how far it will get us. So we have a few options for making sure it's going to do the best that it possibly can do. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to find these, and we are going to set up our struts. So we want this to be incredibly strong. We don't want any issues happening with things wobbling around, because that's just going to make launching way more difficult. I think everybody can understand that. So we're just going to connect it all like so. See how it connects them all, which is really nice. And then the one last thing we're going to do is also connect this tank up here, or that engine. Oop, it's put it in the wrong spot. And I don't know if it's okay. It is grabbing it, so it's not going to want to do it. Let's do this. Let's put it at the top and then put it like so. Perfect. So that won't wobble so much now, which is really good. And we're going to do the same thing up here as well. Okay, so got all the outside ones. They're not all like perfect with the way they're set, but I don't think it'll have much of an effect. The important thing to note is another thing I mentioned in the last episodes, are that, that's not how I wanted to do that, are that the fact that everything that you put on with these struts should break off when the decouplers go. So you shouldn't have any issues. What issue I am having right now is this is not wanting to connect properly because it's running into the legs there, but that looks like that'll work just fine. Remember, all of that's going to decouple anyways, and the struts will disappear, so the struts aren't going to have too much of an effect. The last thing that we're going to do, as far as, I guess, making sure everything's going to work properly, is we are going to add more landing gear. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but we want to be certain that when we land, we're not going to tip over, right? So if we end up having a ton of extra fuel, which we will, because we'll land with these engines, right? We want to make sure that when we land, nothing is going to break, right? So it's going to land and it's not going to tip over. Having all of those landing gear in the center should be more than enough to make sure that is not an issue, but I am going to reposition all of them. And I'm going to actually put them in one at a time just to make sure that we don't have any issues whatsoever. So what I've done here is I have put a single landing gear between each engine. That ensures that if we have engines left over, which we should, that's the goal, that when it deploys, it's not going to be clipping through the engine itself and having issues that way. We're just kind of going full safety mode here. That's the idea, that's the goal. What we do want to do also is add just a few extra ones like that. It's a little bit more mass, but once again, safety, right? This is all a safety precaution. I mean, the landing struts that we don't need are going to decouple anyways, so it's not a huge deal. All that mass will be disappearing as we don't need it any longer. The last thing that we're going to do down at the bottom here is add just a bit more punch to getting off of the surface of the planet.